So this devotional I wrote entitled Finding Shelter, a fall and autumn devotional, is now available by Church Publishing, and I'm pleased to be asked by them to share a reading or two from the book. And this is from Meditation 9. It's entitled The Way of Faithfulness. And I begin with reading from the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verse 16. But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." I mentioned earlier in the book that I grew up in Alabama. Stop your average Alabamian on the street as autumn approaches and ask what they're thinking about come Saturdays in the fall. Most will respond, football. In Alabama, most will be speaking about their loyalty to Alabama or Auburn. I've also lived in Florida, where the answer would be the University of Florida or Florida State. I now live in Texas. The responses are even more numerous. Loyalty to a team can be found in most places across the United States. People, even people who have no formal association with a football team, take great pride in putting up yard flags and having bumper stickers on their cars and wearing jerseys and hats that visibly proclaim their loyalty to their team. The book of Ruth is essentially about loyalty. The Gentile Ruth marries into a Jewish family. When all of the men in the family die, no one would have been surprised if Ruth decided to go her own way. Her mother-in-law, Naomi, actually encourages her to go back to her people. But Ruth is loyal, and as we see in the verse I read a moment ago, she pledges to go with Naomi, to stay with her, and to be loyal to the family that took her in and to their God as well. I could run down a few rabbit trails on this one, but let me limit myself to two. The first one has to do with loyalty to those God has given to us in our relationships, friends and family. There's no question there are people in our lives who may test that loyalty to them. An important caveat here, there's no requirement to stick with someone who might bring harm or destruction into your life. But when God brings people into our lives, and when the bonds of affection, in whatever form they've been born, we are called to stick with those loved ones through thick and through thin. In the marriage service, we ask a couple if they will stay loyal in all kinds of circumstances, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. There are certainly things that test that loyalty, but we're called to stand the test of time. The second rabbit trail would be our loyalty to our faith. We express that in all kinds of ways, but in the same way our relationships can be tested, so can our relationship with our church and, frankly, even with our faith. Some years ago, a friend of mine was having a conversation with a Russian Christian who was staying with a family in Birmingham, Alabama, for a semester of study abroad. One day, the young student said, "What I found fascinating in your culture is that people seem to have no problem changing from one church to another, but they would never change allegiance to their football team." Of course, in a word, that comes down to faithfulness. St. John Chrysostom once preached, faithfulness in little things is a big thing. So true, don't you think? Ruth set a wonderful standard for familial faithfulness and for faithfulness to God. The road she took is worth considering. If a football team is worthy of your devotion, would you not agree that those whom God has poured into your life deserve much more? When it comes to our allegiance to God and to the church, what better model than Jesus, about whom Oswald Chambers once wrote, "Watch where Jesus went. The one dominant note in his life was to do his Father's will. His is not the way of wisdom or success, but the way of faithfulness." As our forebears would say, Amen. so be it. So a new leaf. Football games are great. I've sat through more than I can count and cheered my teams on like the next guy. But the exuberance some show about their favorite sports team begs the question as to whether they can stir their hearts with a like, or better yet, more intense passion for the loved ones in their lives, for their God. Does any of this speak to where you are today? Might Ruth's faithfulness inspire you to consider your own? What might you do differently today to be more faithful to your relationships to your God? So a closing prayer written by William Barclay. He died in 1978. And then another prayer written by St. Augustine. First prayer is a prayer for faithfulness to friends. Help me, O God, to be good and true as a friend, to be always loyal and never to let my friends down, never to talk about them behind their backs in a way which I would not do before their faces, never to betray a confidence or talk about things about which I ought to be silent, always to be ready to share everything I have, to be as true to my friends as I wish them to be to me. This I ask for the sake of Him who is the greatest and truest of all friends, for Jesus' sake. Amen. And this prayer by Augustine, who died around 430 AD, a prayer for faithfulness to God. Now it is you alone I love, you alone that I follow, you alone that I seek, you alone that I feel ready to serve, because you alone rule justly. It is to your authority alone that I want to submit. Command me, I pray, to do whatever you will, but heal and open my ears that I may hear your voice. Heal and open my eyes that I may see your will. Drive out of me all fickleness, that I may acknowledge you alone. Tell me where to look, that I may see you, and I will place my hope in doing your will. Amen.